Hey, what's up, guys? Kind of want to talk a little bit about a lot of things. Uh, Sort of like a little education in Bigfooting here. There's a lot of people out there that are believers, non-believers, skeptics, knowers, so on and so forth. But uh, very few continue to delve into any type of research. So I wanted to share some things with you today um, that are usually, overlooked. So first, I kind of wanted to start uh, here and take a look at what are some of the features of Sasquatch. Um, the extraordinary bulkiness, the overall muscularity. 9 out of 10 times it has the huge, wide shoulders, massive. It's got the human-like head. Um, the ears, are covered um, by hair. Very short neck. A lot of times people report where there's no neck. It looks like the head itself connects right to the shoulders. And from some of our encounters, that seems to be the same. It's got this prominent muscular body or trunk. Um, 9 out of 10 times the ones that people report are 8 feet and taller. There's a breakdown for that. Some people say, the males are bigger than the females. Has a large waist. Most of the time, like I said, they're massive. In some instances, you'll see where people report, well, it looked chiseled, where it had wider shoulders, tapering the V of the back, and but overall it was massive. Powerful human-like legs, visible muscular thighs, and that was one of the things that stood out to us was the thighs. They were massive. We had the one that actually crossed and stood in the trail in front of us. When it turned to walk away, you could see how large the thighs were. One thigh, it would probably be like putting both of my legs together. That's, to give you an idea as a reference. The dark skin around the nose and eyes, from what we've witnessed, it has the dark skin. The one female that I did see had like a grayer face tone to it. But most of the time, their hair kind of comes down the side of their face, under like their cheekbone. The cheekbone is usually skin up in that area, around the eye, the nose. There's really no hair up there for some reason or other. Body totally covered in hair. About the only places would be the bottom of the foot, maybe the hands, and that facial area are the only places that don't have hair. The visible large lips or bigger mouth is probably to accommodate things they eat. They kind of tend to look, that's where people get the Neanderthal look, or they get the ape look. They have that elongated mouth. So as long as you can recognize some of those things, some of those features of Sasquatch, they're easier to pick out in videos and certain things like that. I tell people that everything in the forest is not Bigfoot. I get it. Whether it's physical or metaphysical, you got to stay grounded, and you got to look for your evidence everywhere. There's a lot of people in two different camp situations, I call it, where they're flesh and blood and they're in the paranormal, and they completely block each other out. One doesn't believe the other thinks that it's crazy. And kind of what I tell people is, if we're looking for this evidence of an unknown species, being, hominid, whatever you would like to call it, why would you stick yourself into one camp, let's call this, and not pay attention to what the other one is doing? So when people ask me, well, what do you believe in? I tell them, and they say, well, where do you sit? Are you in the paranormal or are you in the flesh and blood? I say, I got one foot in both. And they look at me funny, like, well, how can you do that? I'm like, well, I've had experiences, I've seen their flesh and blood, physical body, and I've had a metaphysical situation happen. But if I'm not paying attention to both sides, collecting evidence on both sides, I'm not being true to my research. And essentially, I'm limiting everything. I'm actually putting a filter on things that would come in if I wasn't doing that. And they mean, well, when they talk to me, they say, what do you mean would be putting a filter on? Well, if I'm a flesh and blood believer and I hear things from the paranormal, I may pay attention to it. I may get mad. I may do a number of things. And it could be a very good piece of evidence, a very good video, but I'm going to filter that because I don't want to believe in that. And so I have to remain more open-minded on both sides and talk to everybody, pay attention, collect the evidence that we need, whatever it may be. I can't just grab the evidence I want and stuff it in a box, if that makes sense. So with that making some type of sense, well, what I wanted to look at is actually teaching and showing some people some things here. Like the traces left behind by hands, fingers, palms, and knuckles, either on the ground or flat surfaces. So a lot of people say we don't have evidence and things like that don't stand up to scientific research, and you have to use a scientific method. And the way I look at it is, this isn't proven. This species or hominid is not proven, right? So we're essentially in the testing phases, just like any other scientist has done with anything in the last 200 years. They have to test it, have their hypothesis, test and test and test, and but a lot of people, when it doesn't fit, they scrub the whole thought and go in a different direction. They don't try to start over looking at the same thing and try to build off that again. So when you look at anecdotal evidence, such as the tree structures and what we do have, broken and twisted trees, usually the height taller than a human reach, 8 to 10 feet tall. You'll get tree markers, and that's the problem where hunters can have marked trails, or it could be Indian trails. But once you start looking into Bigfoot, you can discern the difference. Even though you can, that still doesn't provide proof, and that's why people get upset, because it's like they know, but they don't have the proof of it. So when you do share, that's where a lot of the problems come in. Things such as footprints. If you read here, it'll explain how the toes clearly impressed in the ground. Dr. Meldrum actually, that's his main profession. So if you're new to Bigfooting, check him out, see what he has to say. Is it correct? We don't know. It's hit and miss. That's his work. That's his profession. He's a professional at what he does. But is it clear-cut proof? No. Has he found some interesting things? Yes. But what it is it's a missing piece to the puzzle. I try to tell people, look at this from a huge puzzle aspect. So you can read here the probable and the foot impressions, so on and so forth. And then we'll kind of move into the stick structures here and the signs. And a lot of people, almost everybody shares them in their videos. And it's a common thing, you have to play it by ear with each structure, because you don't know, between rot, snow load, wind. There's a multitude of things that can cause trees to end up the way they do. But once you start finding other trees that kind of have been transported from one area to another, like if you're in a section of saplings, standing saplings, and you're finding that some birch trees or something had been put into this structure, and it was brought there. That's when you start to really look at the structure and see, you have to look at the root bottom, so on and so forth. It was it cut by human? Was it broke off? Did it come, from the ground? Where's the root ball? Where's the base of that tree? Where did it fall from? So people just go through the woods, they see these structures, and they snap pictures, and that's what it is. They don't really take the time to do the research and pay attention. Kind of like your little checklist of can it be or what is it. And then when you find some in-depth structures, you'll have your weaving and entwining of branches. A lot of people say it's like decoration. Many of fellow researchers that have been doing it a while have their own theories on why they do this. And then you get into a lot of the debarking and bites and scratch marks on the trees. A lot of times I won't even look at that unless it's at least 10 foot up in the air, depending where you are. I mean, bears usually scratch like a scratching post, and it's kind of lower. A standard bear, 6 to 8 feet tall, and an 8-foot bear is pretty big, unless you're in grizz country. In my area, I have black bears, but not many. But if we do find like a scratching post, it's got to be at least 10 foot in the air before I even try to consider it. I try to weave through, the possibilities. And I tell people, with the nail marks, sometimes it indicates obvious finger grasping or the dexterity, the strength in the arm as well, and the peeling action, so on and so forth. You have to take a look at that. There's so many aspects that you have to look at because it's hard to differentiate between like a bear or a Sasquatch claw or their nail, because it's really not a claw that a Sasquatch has, it's their nails. And it'd be like you or me if we lived in the woods and we didn't have groomers or people who cut our nails or pedicures or manicures or nail clippers. They're gonna grow ungodly. And they're going to become strong because they use them as a tool per se, to break things or cut things or carve things, so on and so forth. So it's really hard to discern, between Sasquatch and animal. Now, all across the nation, you find these nests and shelters and possible bedding formations. And what people want you to believe is that it's hunters. Well, what I try to tell people is in this day and age, hunters are not the majority of the time. I'm going to say 99% of the time, a hunter's not building his own blind out of natural trees. You get the 1% that do because they own their property or, something along those lines. But most hunters today want to be versatile. They want to be able to move where the deer are moving or where the hot spots are. So they use, a current pop-up blind. It's cheap, it's definitely inexpensive, it's lightweight. So when people try to say, well, the humans are building these shelters, or it's the Boy Scouts, or it's this or it's that, or a whole slew of things, I try to tell them, if it's Boy Scouts, they usually do it near their camps or in a section of woods. A lot of times they tear it down when they're done. It's kind of for learning purposes. What I tell people is to look for the larger bedding structures, the ones that have really had some time, unless it's just somebody living off in the woods, not behind your Home Depot or something, but I'm talking in the middle of the woods where the weather is rougher, the snow is bad, where somebody's not going to want to live, and you find these things, then it's really something to pay attention to. I also tell people, like with formations, teepees, bends, certain things that go over the trails, you start putting all that together once you've done it a little while. But most will say, well, you can confuse that for human survival type, and it all depends what area you're in. And if you have a lot of survivalists and people doing certain things, it is possible. But once you look at large structures and wonder, well, how did those get moved? because there's no equipment in here, it would need a lot of manpower to do those things. So sometimes the bigger ones are more intriguing, or the tree structures that are continually added to. And I don't stress this enough. Most people, what do you see? They go in the woods, oh, there's a tree structure, let's look at it. They look at it, they photo it, they leave. They never revisit those photos, or they tend not to revisit that area as frequent as they should. So what we started doing is frequently going back to certain known structures and in our area, and the ones that were being added to more and more over like a 3 to 6 month period, those are the areas we would concentrate on. They were coming there for a reason. They were making them bigger for a reason. So what we would figure out is, okay, so say there's 3 structures that are mainly being added to. Well, where are they coming from? Where could they be coming from? How are they accessing these structures? So we could set up in between those certain points. And that's why we've been able to capture them on video, because we were paying attention to the structures that were being added to. Most people also hear the clapping and banging. Most people that research think it's some type of communication, either between themselves or warnings from when intruders like us come into the woods. Remember, that's their home. You got to treat them with respect, and that's why a lot of people hear these screams, knocks, or yells the minute they step foot into the woods. While they're hunting, they might have not paid attention to that, but once they became a researcher, a lot of times it's like they're warning other ones that, hey, there's a person coming. We've had many experiences, especially one with the rock clacking. We were getting responses back and forth with the subject, and to clack rocks together, you need dexterity. You got to use your hands. So we caught that on video, and it was very intriguing. Now, the feeling of uneasiness, it's experienced by hunters, hikers, bird watchers. That general gut feeling that somebody's watching you, or somebody's gonna, when you're playing hide and seek and somebody jumps out to scare you, that's that uneasy feeling. And what I tell people is that gut feeling is 99.99999% of the time accurate. What it means is that they're usually close by, or what happens is your body has energy. It's made up of energy, and when they come close enough to you, you're feeling their energy. So your body is reacting to that stimuli. It's telling you, hey, something's going on here. But a lot of people get really scared. You don't know how many researchers I talk to, and they're like, I got in there, was ready to have a good day, got there, got to the location, and immediately had to turn around and go home because I had that feeling. So what I tell them to do is a few things. First, if your area is, higher elevation, get acclimated to the elevation first. Hang around your vehicle for 20 minutes, take a seat, drink some water, let your body kind of get used to it for 20 minutes, then start your hike. If it happens, once you get in the woods, try to talk to them. At first, it's hard to talk out loud in the woods to nobody. That it feels awkward, but you'll get used to it, and you might get responses because they definitely understand what you're saying. And if you talk to them and tell them, you're making me feel uneasy, and the biggest thing I noticed is if you get there and you have that feeling, you tell them, okay, I know you're here. And once you do that, the feeling tends to go away. And what I believe, it's kind of like, let's go back to if you're playing hide and seek. If you're hiding and I say, hey, Jim Bob, I know you're behind that building there, you might as well come on out. What happens to you? Oh man, he knows I'm here. So you're let down because you're busted, right? Let's just put it that way. So at that point in time, your hiding skills that you're all hyped up into kind of lessen. They drop down, and you're just like, you either give up or you're not as hyped up. That's the best word I could say. You're not as hyped up to hide. So you tell them, hey, I know you're here, and you talk to them, and you try to work through that uneasy feeling. A lot of times what we do is we get there and we'll try to sit down if that happens. If it's the core locations that we're in, because that's what we try to do. We walk on in, you get our videos, we get to the core locations and we sit down. Kind of let them come to us. Let them, if they're near us, 100 or 200 yards away, let them observe us, see what we're doing. Let them feel comfortable with us. And then what happens is a lot of those feelings tend to dissipate. It's because they're accepting you and they're saying you're not a threat, you don't have a gun, so on and so forth. Now, a lot of people habituate, and a lot of the food remains, they'll say, I set up cameras, I had apples, and so on and so forth, and they were taken, and there was no photos. And people get really frustrated, and they say, well, that's why game cameras don't work, and you have to be smart with your game cameras. We've caught them, and they can be captured on trail camera. In the beginning, we used to set our cameras up blatantly, put our apples out, so on and so forth. Some of them were carried way high up in trees, and some just disappeared. We didn't get pictures. But what I think that is you're kind of not in their core area. You're on a back side of it where they can kind of sneak in and grab them. Also, they'll use sticks to set off the camera. A lot of people have said, I catch this stick or branch moving. Well, what happens is if I set that camera off, a lot of times the photo goes off and it takes a second or two to reset, and then you have to clip another picture. Well, in that time, they can grab it and be gone, and then there's no photo. So what I tell people to do is you really have to find their core area where they're actually being seen in the daytime. No matter what time, but the daytime. If you can find that area, you can backtrack them to their bedding areas, but I do not go into them bedding areas. Kind of like deer. If you go in a big buck bedding area, you're going to push him right away and he probably won't return. It's the same with them. Same with you and us. If somebody kept coming in your room while you were trying to sleep, would you keep sleeping there? No, you're going to move to another room, or you're going to get real pissed off really quick. So I tell people, just stay out of their bedding areas. There's no reason for it. If you're going to look around, get in, get your evidence, get out. But what I try to do, like I said, is if you can know where they're bedding and you know that these structures are being added to, and you can set up between these structures on certain days, your chances of seeing one go drastically up. And that's why people say, how have you been able to get this evidence like so fast? It's just implying proper technique, and I think if you start doing that too and learning the way they move, you'll also get it. And as far as the food, if you are going to continue to habituate with them, it's got to be in a safe location. And 9 out of 10 areas that we've tried it, flatland doesn't work. They like to do it near ridge tops, and I think that's so they have easy access where they can escape quicker. Now onto like objects being thrown. You hear people camping, fishing, hiking where there's wood and rocks and pebbles and acorns, and oh my god, they've thrown all kinds of stuff. We don't know if it's to get our attention or if it's a game to them or if they're bored per se or if they're trying to interact. But a lot of times that'll scare people. I mean, if you're in the woods and you get something thrown at you and you can't see anything, you're going to leave. So that could be a way of, hey, kind of back off and get out of our area. The unusual placement of things, rocks and so on and so forth, that's part of habituation too, I believe. A lot of people have found, if I put a rock up, sometimes they'll add to it. It could be, they're part of communication. They may have learned things from the Indians way back when, or seen them do certain things with stones and so on and so forth. So no one really knows the true answer to that, but there's a lot of theories. Onto the odors. Now, a lot of people talk about the odors. Well, I've only experienced it probably once, and I've had 4 sightings, visual. So it's not all the time. I tell people, I believe it's only when you're downwind or really close to them. I've had a juvenile 15 feet away from me. That was my first encounter. Didn't know what it was, but I didn't smell anything. My dog was about 75 to 100 yards behind me, but the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, so it all depends. And what that smell, I believe, is, it's kind of like a deer. If you've ever shot a deer that was a swamp buck, you can smell them. It's dank, it's musty. I mean, it's not like they get up and shower, but they might groom themselves, because other apes groom themselves, and they take care of themselves pretty good, but you're still going to have that outdoor smell. If you or I were out there, for a month and didn't shower, imagine what we would smell like. And I've tried to tell people, if there's wild food out there, the methane gas, but it's highly improbable that, you're going to find these things. You'll get them short-term smells. So every smell is not a Sasquatch, but if you do smell something like that, be on guard, start looking up in the trees, looking as close as you can, zooming your cameras in. A lot of times it's all about getting to an area that you believe they're in, and sitting and waiting on them. Now the sudden quietness, we've all experienced this. You'll be in the woods, the birds are chirping, you may have seen a deer or some type of wildlife, and then all of a sudden it's null and void. Now, does that mean a Sasquatch is coming into the area? It could. A lot of times the other wildlife know what's what, and they just pipe right up. But on the other hand, like if a deer comes through, a lot of times the blue jays go crazy. They're like the alarm of the woods, for anybody that knows that sound. And they kind of, they let people or whoever the forest know, hey, there's something coming. It's kind of like the alarm. But for some reason, this quietness comes over, and it's a very eerie feeling. So I tell you to pay attention to those things. Shadows and movements, I mean, we see this all the time. And I try to tell people, if the human body, like I said before, it's energy. There's I believe it's 528 kilohertz the body vibrates at. You have your own frequency. If they have a higher frequency and they vibrate at a different resonance, we can't see them. But there's got to be a way to manipulate it or slow it down, because it's that's when we see them. We catch them off guard, and we're able to see them, or the cameras see them, or so on and so forth. Maybe they are from a dimensional standpoint. I'm not sure. But I have to look at both. How can they be physical and metaphysical? It's odd. So a lot of times you'll just see the shadows, which are too fast for you to catch, or your eye movement, but a lot of times it could just be your mind playing tricks on you. So you have to stay grounded. You have to look at it from a huge perspective. Because a lot of people get in there and they start to scare themselves because they see these shadows. Could it be them? It could be a number of things. So just try to capture everything on camera. The unusual debris piles kind of would appear overnight and quick. Like I try to tell people in our videos, we would find these stacks of branches, stacks and stacks, and I'm not really sure why. Because it didn't look like it was bedding. It didn't look like anything, but something had brought it in there, and there might be 100 of them stacked on top of each other, just laid there. Then they're all broken. They're not cut by human. So that's one thing we're trying to figure out, why they're doing that, because it seems to have no relevance to anything else that they're doing. There's been reports of shaking vehicles. All kinds of stuff. Vehicles approached. Even hair weaving on farm animals, on cattle and horses, have been reported. So, is it them bonding with other animals? They say, the forest works together. which is possible. So you never know. You can't throw anything out until you can disprove it all. Kind of onto samples now. The DNA, I don't know if it's going to prove it or not, even if you did have DNA. Everybody knows Dr. Meldrum. Dr. Meldrum states that it is unclear whether DNA alone could settle the Sasquatch controversy under any circumstances. As a working scientist, Meldrum offered these words of caution. So this is what he said right here. The conventions of zoological taxonomy require a type specimen. So what he's saying, that DNA probably won't prove it, that we need a specimen, traditionally in the form of a body or a sufficiently diagnostic physical body part, hand, foot, something relative, to decisively establish the existence of a new species. Whether DNA alone will ultimately satisfy that standard remains to be seen, but he is doubtful. I am not aware of a precedent for determining a new species on the basis of DNA evidence in the absence of a physical specimen. So I believe that, we are all testing our DNA out there, but it comes down to a specimen to actually prove this, if that's what you're wanting to do. So in turn, you could have all of these and all of these, but I doubt it will make a difference unless you're doing it for yourself. So you got to start to look at other ways of proving this, if that's what you're looking for. Now on to the vocals. We've got a lot of these recorded on our SoundCloud. Sometimes we share them. Ron Moorhead was one of the first to ever capture them in audio. It's been an ongoing thing, but a lot of people try to say it's coyotes or foxes or certain things like that. But once you get, really good audio of them talking, or a conversation, or yelling, and they're screaming, what they do with audio is they look for what's called morphemes and phenoms, which are indicative of language. You can read about that. And if you start getting that, if you send your stuff to linguistic people and they take a look at it, you'll know you're actually getting something, because they'll come back with, phenoms in your in the breakdown of the language that you're hearing per se. But I tell you, audio is very difficult, and it takes a really long time to go through it. So unless you're a hardcore researcher and like to do that, it can get exhausting. You'll hear everything from whoops and shouts to like different types of language. We've heard, shrieks, human calls, where it sounds like a woman screaming, anxiety and distress calls, like I recorded not too long ago. There's the whining calls that sound like coyotes and foxes. You'll hear your guttural roars. They're powerful, loud. I mean, their lung capacity seems gigantic. You'll hear the roars. And you'll hear your grunts, your gibberish, your screeches. So when you start taking all these little bits of evidence and putting it together, you understand that a regular animal doesn't do this. On to the birthing now. If you're a real serious investigator, you want to find out where they're giving birth, where they're sleeping, understanding the effects of wind direction, velocity, so on and so forth. The way the land is laid out, there's a lot of contributing factors to it. If you're a tracker or a really good deer hunter, or you spend a lot of time in the woods and you know all these things, you can start to correlate them all together, and it will help you find them. So now that you've had that rundown, what we'll do is we'll move on to a couple other things. This here is a footprint that we found in some grass. We find prints a lot of the times, but our substrate just isn't good for casting. This is a photo here I just wanted to share. It is kind of unclear, but we had somebody point it out to us a few years ago. Now, if you look at the grayness of the tree, this is about 10 foot up in the tree. We were walking underneath it, going this direction. And it looks to have something in the tree here where you could see two nostrils, two eyes, like the eyebrows with the heavier brow ridge. And back here it's black, which doesn't match the trees. So could that be a possible watching us? Yeah, so I tell a lot of people, make sure you're looking up in the trees. Take your time. Snap as many photos as you can. The first thing you should be doing once you're entering the woods is snapping photos, because that's when you're going to catch them getting up to leave or move into a strategic location, because you're coming in to invade their space. So they're going to get up and move. And if you're clicking 200-300 photos on your outing, you may catch something. Here's a Bigfoot photo that's been gone over I don't know how many times. Is the Memorial Day footage by Pate. They actually had a huge attempt to recreate this with a track star, somebody that ran really fast with a GPS unit on his back to map out everything. And they ended up finding out he was not able to keep up with anything of the original video. You can see the stride length here. I forget what it was, but that's one key feature, is their stride length. When you're looking at footprints, the footfalls usually fall in a line, unlike humans. Humans have a different gait. Our feet are side to side per se, and theirs fall one right on top of another in a straight line. So when you find a trackway, make sure it's in a straight line, before you really start examining it. And this photo is, I believe it's like the Yuktuk tribe. It's an Indian painting that is supposedly supposed to be Sasquatch. Now, this is before cameras and news and everything else, so this is how they communicated. So for them to actually take the time to do something like this, it had to have been of, relevance or importance to tell others. So that's why I try to tell the non-believer, look, they were doing this for a reason. A lot of people grasp onto this and say, well, it's because of this and money and that. And if you really start looking in the history, you'll see a lot of things. And this is an intriguing painting. Now, the olive baboons, it's kind of funny because some of the photos that people put online actually look like this species, their face. It's funny to me because I know they're not around here, so it's just intriguing. So I wanted to share some of this. I've actually seen Sasquatch go down on all fours, and so have many other people. It's like they run faster, they stay low to the ground, they hide themselves. It's an easier way of escaping. So I don't want you to think that they don't knuckle walk, because they do. And this is a picture of the Great Rift Valley. Near here, they found a lot of skeletons from millions of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I suggest you look into some of that if you're really serious about doing some research. Now, just wanted to touch really quick on your Darwinism. For people that don't know what it is, it's like the theory of evolution of species. It's like a natural selection. But here's some writings that I found in a book. The Rethinking of Darwin Evolution and the Theory of Punctuated Equilibria. Their refinement of Darwin's tenets was misconstrued in the headlines saying Darwin was wrong. Yet they didn't refute Darwin's theory of natural selection, but they change the tempo or the mode in which it occurs. Gould and Eldredge emphasize status. Long periods of little or no change. The equilibria of their title denotes rapid events. In history, there was a few rapid events that took place, and they were not able to really figure out how it happened. That's why I tell you to start looking into, different types of hominids, and learning about it, because you might come to your own conclusion. So I'll let you read this for a second here. The thing I say is, times are ever changing, so how can science not change with it? I think everything is a science in a way, because we're always learning, we're always testing. Going back to the drawing board, testing again. Scientists have been wrong many times, and then when it's retested, there's a totally different outcome. So we start to refute things, no matter how scientific you want to be. You can always apply a method, but who's to say it's right or wrong? It's hard to apply a scientific method to something that's not proven yet. In a way, we know they're real, but it's like we're creating our own scientific method to prove what they are. We're getting there. A lot of people report the metaphysical state, the paranormal state. I've seen it. I don't know what it is, but I'm doing as much research as I can into it. Since we're on the metaphysical state, the method they favor is known as DNA hybridization, and it features a peculiar dance of the famous double helix. In short, the DNA different species are encouraged to bond together to create a hybrid DNA molecule. It's crazy, because a lot of people think that Bigfoot is a hybridization. So could it have been created? Does it have that double helix? We don't know yet. We don't know, if it's flesh and blood or if it's metaphysical. I mean, I've seen both states. How can it do that? Currently, I'm working on frequencies and learning frequencies and stuff like that, because I believe that there's more to do with frequencies in the Bigfoot world. If you are going to look into bones and hominids, and I don't know if you have this chart, but I'm sure you've seen it. It's a breakdown of, millions of years here. Millions of years before the present, all the way up to 500 million years. And they break down your eras that you can look into, and there's different hominids and there's so much to learn if you're really going to research Bigfoot. If you're just going out to have a good time, have fun. If you're not too keen on what the hominid vault is, you can go ahead and take a look at that, where they found the black skull, and they compare multiple skulls. Some were elongated, some didn't fit the bill. So what happens is, these scientists of the day come up with their own concoction and kind of, took parts of things to fit. Certain skulls weren't even found intact, and they were taking pieces of other skulls and putting them together to make one. And I don't know if that's proper, but it fit the bill for them. So that's why I said science is changing, and it needs to change as the time changes. Time to me is, irrelevant. I think it's just something that man created. You always hear the land before time. It's just a number that we put on things. Back to the it's the Yukuts. Yeah, it's an Indian tribe. This is some more of their rock art. Now, I mean, to be drawing things like this hundreds of thousands of years ago, for what? For what reason? To me, this looks like a doorway here. I mean, what else would that be? This is your, international peace symbol. This to me looks like a Sasquatch. These look like little people, or if this is the Indians themselves and they're drawing these big families. Why were they drawing a doorway? And is this a fountain, or what is this? It's open to interpretation everywhere. So could this be, them showing the paranormal to us? We don't know. Even as far, way back the Mongolian history, Tibet, and so many other lands, the way they've drawn these, mountain men, wild men creatures, they've been around for centuries. So if you start to take the evidence and put it all together, it's creating a strong case for, people such as the non-believers to become believers. I'll just briefly touch on this also in Turkana. If you get a chance to look that up, some researchers from Utah State University found a lot of bones in the Lake Victoria area. So check it out. Do your own research on the hominids they found and what their interpretations were. Basically, what we all do is cryptozoology, and people say, is it a real or a pseudoscience? Pseudo meaning fake. In a way, we're all learning, we're all testing theories and hypotheses and many aspects of research. A lot of science doesn't get involved, whether it's due to funding or money or credibility, or, we're all in this together, right? And I don't care if you're flesh and blood or paranormal, but when, let's just take somebody like Melba Ketchum that, does a study. A lot of people say she screwed it up, but instead of trying to help her or do the right thing to prove this, everybody went against her. So maybe if it happens in the future with somebody, they could get on board and help, give their opinions for what it matters, because if we're trying to prove this thing, not just sit there and say, hey, it's this, or they don't exist, or such and such, or just because she didn't get a paper, it's because the credible scientists out there didn't want to back it. I understand the paper was not that good, okay? But it's a start. It's a start in the right direction. It got people talking. It got, publicity. I understand she had to get her own journal and do her own thing, and she tried really hard and nobody wanted to help her out. But for researchers like myself that just, you can't just stand on the sidelines and give your 2 cents. In my opinion, you have to, get involved. You have to, if you're really trying to prove this, instead of being a naysayer, the next time that comes up or something like that happens, or there's some type of DNA study really big and funded, because that was the main problem, is they really couldn't get funded. They were made to look really bad. It's not my opinion, it's just something I wanted to throw out there. So if you're a researcher, and you got the evidence, come forward. If you're a non-believer, start looking at all the evidence. Broaden your mind. Get out in the woods. I invite people to come up to my area. I can show them things. I ask them to bring their own cameras, because when they catch stuff at home and they go through it, they can understand, wow, that's unexplained. And this is the next thing you will always hear from a non-believer, a skeptic, or scofftic, somebody that wants to just laugh at this. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Carl Sagan actually said that years ago. In a way, it's true. But when you have multiple people making these claims, I understand it's not full proof or evidence, but I believe if scientists had the means and weren't so worried about reputation or funding, we would get farther. They talk about a lot of crazies and crackpots and people making claims and so on and so forth. I understand that. So that's why one has to stay grounded. If you're not taking a common sense approach to everything, then you probably shouldn't be in the woods looking for Bigfoot. They go as far as saying some memories of strange experiences or eyewitness encounters of bizarre beasts can be attributed to sleep deprivation, dreams, hallucinations, and they'll give an example here where a Harvard psychologist, Susan Clancy's research on alien abductees, but I can't say that. I can't, I mean, could that be part of the problem? It could. It's kind of like your own mind is forecasting, and that's, in turn what you're seeing. But when you start getting things on video that aren't supposed to be there, that's not a hallucination. That's not a dream, deprivation. That's where, a group of people sees it. Like our group, we see it. A few people videotaped it. Then you put it online and hundreds more see it. I understand they talk about group hallucinations and so on and so forth. But in this digital age, things are changing. And I believe science needs to also. I encourage people to read this fun little book here, Abominable Science. It's just something fun. If you're just getting into Bigfoot, it's a good read. And this here is kind of like where John Green did a lot of research back in the day. If you don't know about him or Dehinden, or there's a multitude of them, but it's just some things I wanted to share. He says that you need to know their diet, what they're eating, to be able to study them, which is true. Like a deer, you need to know where they're eating, where they're sleeping, where they're getting their water. If this is some type of primate, which I don't know. From what I've seen, I can't say that it is, but the food they eat, that's where they get most of their water, so generally they don't visit water too often. This is where Green and a few other people submitted some samples, some specimens back in the day. In this one particular part, other people have collected and in some cases have sent their suspected Sasquatch hair specimens to various laboratories for analysis. As reported by John Green and Napier, some of the hair samples have been identified as being from known animals, yet others cannot be attributed to any known animal species. So either they found some type of new animal species or it's Bigfoot hair. Plain and simple. And these are the things that normal people do not know about. On to some more. This is the Naz mask found by the river in British Columbia. It was supposed to be a mask of a mythical creature, which is oddly looking like Bigfoot. And it's amazing that even back in the day they were doing things in depictions of Bigfoot. This is a breakdown of the Yurok monsters and what they believed. And if you get a chance to look into a lot of Bigfoot or cryptid sightings, Newfoundland has a tremendous amount. I suggest you do some reading on that. This is a good read if you get a chance. It's got some interesting facts, so I suggest you could pick it up and give it a look. This is something I wanted to show. It's one of my first casts when I'm first learning. You can kind of see some of the toe evidence in the line structure here, but you'll see the flexation in that foot, which I thought was intriguing. But as time goes on, you get better. I tell people if they're going to be doing casts, use Hydrocal 50. Dental stone is good, but it's more expensive. But Hydrocal is really strong. It sets up pretty good. So if you are going to do casts, I suggest you get some of that instead of just standard plaster. I've got a few more. They didn't come out really well because all I had was plaster, and they came out of a really dry area and very rocky, and some of it was hard to take care of, but we couldn't get it cleaned out enough to get good prints. This here is kind of like a table and statistical tests of Napier and others. They talk about Roger Patterson, and they talk about track lengths and ranges and so on and so forth. It's something that one should read if they're interested into getting into Bigfoot or stuff like that. I will give you the names at the end of some of the books I quote. That's where they talk about the body size and weight and ratios and scales and so on and so forth. So in summarizing this, hypothesis is here. You have two options: that the most complex and sophisticated hoax in history of anthropology has continued for centuries without being exposed, or that the most man-like and largest non-human primate on Earth has managed to survive in parts of North America and remains undiscovered by modern science. To me, that's an interesting statement, because if you're going to say that, in a way, it's like the scientists are saying that it's either a hoax or it's real. So you mean to tell me that there's all these hoaxes going on out there? To me, most hoax sightings are one of two things. Usually by the road, because that's where the majority of people say, hey, I seen one crossing the road. People are not 1, 2, 3, 5, 20 miles in the woods just sitting there waiting in a monkey suit to hoax somebody. People have better things to do. Mainly be online. That's what it seems like. But I do believe that there are sightings by the road, and I believe it's male sightings, because 9 out of 10 times, what do you hear? I seen this upright creature, 9, 10 foot tall. It was massive, jumping a guardrail. You never hear it was a small juvenile or it was a female. No, it's 9 out of 10 times it's the male. So what we believe is that the males are the ones traveling for mating purposes, and that the females and the juveniles stay in the core home ranges, and that's where the males come. They in essence migrate location to location, and that's why you start to get different facial features, different body styles, because if one from Florida is mating with one from California or Utah or New York, they have different traits, and things start to happen, and that's why you get these variations. Or this is not just interbreeding, this is why you might get toe deformation, because maybe they're not compatible or something like that. But it's always the males you see crossing the road, it's not the females. Why is that? So we believe that we're going to try to test that if we can keep getting more evidence that the males are the ones doing the moving. So start to pay attention to that. And I believe the females and juveniles are the ones staying back in the core locations. Here's a little bit of the rest of the reading here. How they're omnivorous, how they're not that active in cold weather. Our area in western New York tends to decline in the winter, and we had followed their trackway out toward Pennsylvania and off toward Ohio. I'm going to give you a tidbit. What you do is you look on the maps, you find out how they're moving. You look for the fingers and the ridges and the way certain areas connect. I've done a video on that prior. You can go back into the history and pay attention to that, the way I show how they move. And then when we started talking to people in Pennsylvania and Ohio, our area kind of, the Pennsylvania and Ohio get more activity toward the winter time, the river valleys and so on and so forth. And when we started connecting and talking to those people, they said, yeah, this is our high activity time. So it made sense that they were moving from our area in Western New York to that direction, even the Allegheny region. And then what happens, it seems like around May, June, July, they're up here. And you know, as long as you can find their core areas and they don't move off a lot, you'll be able to get some good evidence as long as you pay attention to what we've laid out for you. The biggest thing is, do not scare them out of the area. People say they want to harm you. It is possible that they could. You hear about this, you know, there might be rogue ones and so on and so forth, but you see from our videos, there was plenty of chances for them to do harm to us. And you see me by myself where I walk toward one that I did not know was there, and he turns around and he leaves in one of our prior videos. So I don't believe they want to do harm unless you do harm to them, possibly. They just want to remain hidden and elusive. But as far as the metaphysical, physical state, I'm going to start doing more research on that, and if I can come up with more conclusions, I'll definitely share it. But like I said, most of the time it doesn't seem like, you know, they're dangerous. Lastly, I'll get into like the word Sasquatch and its angelic name and the way they break it down here. Feel free to, you know, read that. I tell people to, you know, if you're going to start researching, be safe, be smart. You know, we do our thing, Western New York Bigfoot Association. And a lot of hunters say, you know, I don't believe it because I've been out there forever. Well, we understand. I'm a hunter too, 24 years. I was always looking for deer, not paying attention to the tree structures and what could have been there. But I did have those uneasy feelings while I was hunting. As of 2013, I know why. This species or this hominid is real. Feel free to contact me, you know, if you want to come out and do some research in our area, if you want to check things out. Maybe you'll have your own experience. But for now, guys, like, sub, share. Please support our channel if you like our hard work. It all goes to new equipment and so on and so forth. We thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And look for our next video. Thanks.